everyone. Welcome to another episode of Leaders. Today, I have the honor to be joined by Mr. Wes Bearden, who wears more than one hat. He's the current president of the World Association of Detectives. He's a qualified attorney, and he also is the chairman of Bearden Investigation Group. Hey, Wes, how you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you guys doing?
Yeah, good. Pleasure to have you on board. Just introduce yourself to anyone that's listening.
Sure. My name's Wes Bearden. I've kind of grown up in this the investigative industry or profession. This is the only thing I've done all my life, and I love it. I started as an investigator. I was real close and on the board of directors for the Texas Association of Licensed Investigators. I decided to go back to school and become a lawyer. Then I became the general counsel for Tally for about a decade, helping them out quite a bit. I was a past president of NCISS, which is the National Council of Investigative Security Services. And now I've just been recently elected as the president of the World Association of Detectives on a pretty historic year, because this is our 100th anniversary that we're having. We're celebrating our 100th meeting in where we started it, Chicago, Illinois, in September of 2025.
Wow, so it's 100 years. Tell us a little bit about the association, the WAD.
Yeah, the WAD is one of my favorite associations. We all these associations have a specific purpose. And when you're looking around to join an association nowadays, they've kind of, like everybody here that's probably listening, you've got a little bit of your practice or your business. You're probably specialized in something. What I think WAD is first off, it's a true international association. A lot of times you'll say, well, it's an international association. It turns out to be about 85% American, British, Canadian, guys, and that's fine, and that's okay. But really, we've got about 1,000 people, members, and they're in about 85 different countries. We've got, if you look at our board of directors right now, which is probably about 35 people. We're really all over the place. I mean, it's in almost every continent. We have a lot from Southeast Asia right now. A lot of our board members are from Europe. So it's really a diverse group. And part of that association, what we really are trying to do there is really, not just facilitate international work, not just try to make sure that you have somebody, but really create lifelong friendships. And I have found that really is the benefit of WAD. It's one thing to get on the internet and find somebody in Sweden. It's a whole different deal if you've sat down and broken bread with that person, you've had a cup of coffee, you basically have a mind meld about what you're willing to do, what you want, what the work product is. It's just, that's the real benefit of WAD, is really the collegiate atmosphere and the connections that are made there.
Yeah, no, completely understood. So why did you devote so much time? Because these are non-paid positions, right? You devoted your time as legal counsel for Tally, NCISS as president there, and now through the chairs and the board with WAD. That's quite a lot of time through your working week. What gives you the motivation to do that? Why would you choose to do that?
Well, I think, multiple things. I think and if you ask most of the board members of any of these associations, I think, some altruistic purposes, meaning that, you want to see the profession become better. Most of these associations, with the exception of WAD, which is at 100 years old, most of our ABIs falls in that group of being somebody who's been around for a long, long time. But a lot of the other associations really, they were formed 50 or 60 years ago. And, they've kind of morphed, and what we're doing in those associations is different than what they started back in the 50s or the 60s or the 70s when they kind of came about. And it's exciting. I mean, you learn a lot, you make a lot of lifelong contacts, a lot of business gets swapped not because you're part of an exclusive group or anything, but just because when you're sitting across the table dealing with issues that you're to pop up in any profession, you become friends with these people, and you wind up doing business, and you wind up liking each other. And so it's some of my closest friends I've met through these associations, and we're in a unique business. Everybody's got a hell of a story about how they did it, the best case, whatever. So it's kind of that's why I do it. I mean, I really enjoy it. I enjoy getting up and talking about the hard parts and the easy parts. It's fun part of the job.
Yeah, cool. Understood. So let's talk to me a little bit about your leadership journey then, Wes, in terms of outside of the association, in your, attorney role, investigator role, the bit about Bearden Group. Talk to me about what you found that the challenges you've faced potentially, and what in terms of leading a team of people?
Yeah. Well, I think there, all sorts of challenges. When I got into this business at a very, very young age, and really when I started managing it, I was still pretty young at the time. And it took a lot for me to learn to be a leader. I mean, leadership is something that I think we're really kind of missing today. And particularly, I'm in the States, that's a quality that we were kind of, pretty well known for. I mean, if you think of, our big leaders, and I'm not just talking about Washington and Lincoln and people like that, but I'm also, talking about our industries of Titans, Rockefeller, Morgan, and whoever. We've got a long history of it, and I don't know that we're teaching it enough to our kids today here, but really, kind of the way I learned it was somewhat through these associations, but also just through trying to listen and take different perspectives as time went on. And that's not an easy thing to do, and particularly in our type of line of business. Most of what I do in terms of BIA and or the investigative agency and the law firm, really is contentious. I mean, we're fighting. We're usually fighting somebody. You know what I mean? I don't know who we're fighting that day, but we're fighting somebody. So it's it's contentious, but you got to learn to listen. You got to learn to have a sense of humor. You've got to learn to be able to relate to people and kind of get people's wagons in the right direction. And I think it takes a lot of experience. And I've probably learned it from about half a dozen to a dozen people. That some people I've worked with, some people have just been close friends of mine. That I've picked up on characteristics on things over the years. That's kind of how my journey has gone. And obviously, what I've done in these associations has been pretty helpful. I mean, I learned a lot from those three groups.
Yeah, I get it. And each group provides a different steer, I suppose. You've got, Tally, which is your local. You've got your national with NCISS, and then you've got the board around WAD from, covering a variety of countries where people bring different skills, cultural skills and ethical skills, I suppose, as well to the table. It's all quite, picking the best from the best, really. In terms of the industry, and let's get into the roots a little bit in terms of investigating, how have you seen that change over the years that you've been working in the field?
Well, I think the profession as a whole has changed in terms of, the types of shops that we've had. I mean, if you really look back in my dad's generation, mm-hmm. those were true agencies, and agencies dominated kind of the market. Now, some of that I think is because of the business as a whole. I mean, today, we could push out a report that has a ton of data almost not instantaneously, but pretty quick. Back then you had to have somebody type it up. You had to, you might have had to go get it. For instance, I saw an old report we had the other day from the 60s. It said the guy had to go take the photos down to get them developed. We don't do that anymore. So there's some of that. And then, when I think kind of towards the late 80s and 90s, you really began to see kind of the 1 or 2 man shop. And I'd say the 1 to 3 man shop, really. And there was a lot of benefit to that. I mean, a lot of those guys were jacks of all trade, but kind of what we began to see is that we saw a lot of these guys kind of begun to become specialized. They became computer examiners. They were guys doing audits and financial investigations. People tended to be more matrimonial. Others ones tended to be more employment, and you began to see some type of specialization. Now, I think as we're kind of getting into this century, you're starting to see kind of maybe some of these agencies kind of come back a little bit, and I think that's just because people. Being a 1 or 2, 3 man shop's a hard business. It really is. And so I think, you're starting to see people want to be, a little bit more collegial. They want to, they want to group together and things like that. So it's changed. And obviously what we have access to and the technology and, is for instance, cryptocurrency, man. I mean, cryptocurrency investigations are a huge deal right now. Yeah. That was something that was never even thought of 10 years ago. And so it's, it's evolving almost every day.
Yeah, completely. And you've got to stay ahead of the game. And so do you see those trends continue to increase? I mean, what would your advice be for someone that's thinking about, the investigation career is for me, or I'm coming out of law enforcement or a period with the military or private sector out and, through and through? What advice would you give to guys coming into the industry now?
Well, use your associations. You need to make friends. And, I'm from Texas, so I'm going to use the old Texas. I really believe there's a lot to be said about the Texas or the old cowboys of the old West and the private investigator, because, we're out there. And And a lot of times we're dealing in areas that at best are gray, where we're the ones that, are not sitting in ivory towers and office buildings trying to figure out, we're having to make split second decisions, whether it's on surveillance or whatever. And that's kind of what the old cowboy was, some guy was sheriff and, his qualifications were you got a badge and go take care of the problem. And so, I think there's a lot of that. And the best way to, if you remember watching any of those old West movies, or, you always had a sidekick. The Lone Ranger always had Tonto or somebody. So you need to have somebody you can bounce things off of. And, that doesn't necessarily mean you go hire a lawyer or banker, but you need to have friends who are those things. You need to have, some type of contact. I mean, that's really what I think. This is an evolving deal, and it really does require you to pay attention. And I would also say, if you're getting into it, you kind of need to think about how you want to position yourself. I mean, if you're if you're starting your own business, you're going to wind up having to do a little bit of everything. You're going to have to do a locate. You're going to have to do a marital. You're going to have to do this, but you also need to figure out what you like and what you really do well. And, it may not be all those things, and then kind of, maybe hone in on those and be known for that. So you need to kind of position yourself to be successful.
Yeah. And it's difficult sometimes wearing more than one hat. You might be a skilled investigator, but you don't know how to grow your business. So it becomes sort of, where do you concentrate your efforts in? And I agree with the association interaction to try and meet as many people as possible. How do you see the investigation industry change over the next decade or so? Where do you think that investigators should maybe focus on potential opportunities that are maybe starting to come into fruition, or that maybe we see the next thing evolve? Where's your vision in that?
Yeah. Well, I think a couple of things. I think, and it probably depends on where you're at in this world, but I think from a technology standpoint, and you can turn on the TV now, this artificial intelligence is taken over, and we don't know what the applications of all those things are going to be. Sure, I'll tell you right now, we're using AI in both my law firm and the investigative agency on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. I don't have any belief that what we use it for today is going to be the same reasons we're using it for in 5 years. I think there's going to be, you see it if you're on any social media, there's, you can see your political leaders dancing with each other or whatever. or saying stuff that is not true. So, I think there's a lot of opportunity there, and I think you're going to have to know it. No matter what you do, you're going to have to know it. We're seeing some advancements in the cell phone and the computer stuff, but those things have been around for a little bit. I really think those are the next areas. Cryptocurrency is a big deal. It's a real big deal. And we're starting to see some real unique ways that not only bad guys are, for instance, defrauding individuals, but we're starting to see some tools start to develop on how you get that money back and how you find it and how you go back and trace it. And so, those are the things that I see. I also see on I don't know, my jury's still out a little bit about personal information. We went in the 1970s, 80s, and 90s in my country through a real big push to really become transparent in terms of public information. And a lot of that was not private investigators doing. A lot of that was newspapers, which have all gone belly up. And now we've seen a big push in the last 20 years about privacy. And we might begin to see a pushback. And I think it's important to have that pushback. So, kind of understanding that and understanding what's not just what's available, but, how that might change over the next 20 years is probably pretty worthwhile deal to be paying attention to.
Yeah. When you say privacy, what you mean in terms of
right? Yeah. In terms of an individual.
I'm going to say you guys are spoiled, your side of the pond, to be honest with you, in access to data compared to what's available in Europe. You guys are spoiled. So being this side of the pond in terms of seeing what's available in the US, it can be quite jealous.
Yeah, it is. But but if you really look at those stories, again. That happened over a period of decades. Part of the reason there was scandal after scandal with politicians, and the news media basically said we need to have access to it. Yeah. And using the court system and using the freedom of press that we have in this country, that's why we had all sorts of lawsuits over the years about we want to see the mayor's expense records because we don't believe them, and they'd fight that and get it. And we don't have that in other countries right now, and that there's been that huge push towards privacy. I would really hope to say, it's my hope that it kind of comes back. I think as a society, we do better when everybody's hands are on the table and we can see what everybody's doing if it's fairly applied. And I hope that takes part, because I think we're particularly,
You're right.
like you mentioned, in Europe, I think it's almost to a detrimental point, but that's my belief.
No, I agree. And the other thing is there's so much data being uploaded to the internet daily, open source or whatever the type of data it is, whether it's information obtained via whatever means, and it's just there's a lot of data, so you're going through false positives rather than facts. And yeah, the role of the investigators as such has changed. With that, Wes, in terms of access to data, information that's available, investigated in the modern age, because that's what we're doing now, right, compared to how it used to be. How have you found relationships between the private sector in what you do and the public sector in terms of synergy? Where do you sit with that, dealing with, I don't know, either law enforcement or other agencies, either locally or internationally? How have you found that relationship between private and public sector?
I think it's better than it had been when we first, than 20, 30, 40 years ago. But I think it always needs to improve, and a lot of times what I find is that many times in the public sector, they don't understand. And even the average, if you go to your cocktail party tonight and you say, I'm an investigator, people are going to go, oh, really? Well, what does that mean? Because they don't understand what it means, and they don't understand the need for kind of what we do. And so, look, we are, and I don't care what country you're in, we're a spoke in the justice system. We are. I mean, we're not the whole kit and caboodle. We're not the judge or the attorneys, but we're spoke, and we have a place, and we have to explain to them what our place is. And one thing that I think is the most detrimental, and you should be aware of this, is that it only takes one investigator doing something really kind of stupid or crazy on the front page of the newspaper, and then you lose all credibility very, 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 very quickly. We've had that, unfortunately, in this profession happen too many times. And so, yeah, I think the synergy works there, but I think a lot of it needs to continue to be this, is explaining what is our role? Why are we doing what we're doing? And yeah, sure, we may not align with law enforcement all the time, and many times we do. But, it's just making sure that everybody understands that. I'm not sure that we're reaching out as much as we should be, but we definitely need to be trying to do that. And we definitely need to be trying to breathe some life into those relationships.
Oh, definitely, for sure. What makes a good investigator, Wes?
I've always thought somebody who's quick on the uptake, somebody who is not afraid, meaning somebody who, you can give them a million records to go through. You can tell them to go interview the CEO of Exxon or a bum on the street, and they're willing to go give it a shot, even though they may have never done it before. Somebody who is also dogged and is willing to get an answer and not just be turned away at no. I think today what's critical is an investigator who's willing to talk. Because, I meet so many young guys and gals that, if it's not on the computer, that in their mind, it doesn't exist. I mean, we all know that's not true. And so, being able to actually talk to people is a real, characteristic that you got to have, no matter what you're doing.
Yeah, definitely. That skill of getting beyond the keyboard, as they say, get out on the streets like they used to do back in the day. So, no, I agree. So I want to bring it back before we finish off to the association, the WAD. Tell us what's coming up in September. Give some sort of information about who should attend. A little bit, cloak some of the key points.
It'll be September 2nd through 6th. We were founded in 1925. Founder was kind of a contemporary J. Edgar Hoover when he was very young. Then went off into the Secret Service. There's a lot of good evidence. Our first meeting was at the Drake Hotel in Chicago. If you're not familiar with the Drake Hotel in Chicago, it's one of the oldest hotels. It's a neat old hotel that everybody from Al Capone, Winston Churchill, Marilyn Monroe, all the presidents have stayed there. It's got a lot of history, and it looks like an old 1920s hotel. And, this is our 100th meeting. And if you're not familiar with WAD, we meet in 2 locations. We have our annual meeting, and then we have a board meeting in different places throughout the world. We kind of pick and what continents they're at. In fact, I think we're headed to Lisbon, Portugal here for a midterm meeting here shortly. But it's going to be a big celebration of our whole association, everybody who supported us. We have a number of associations that are supporting us. ABI is one of them. IKD, NCISS will be having their meeting there. We'll have some continuing education. We will, if you've been to a WAD event, there's a lot of socializing. A lot of cocktail hours, dinners, and that's purposeful. We want you to make friends. We want you to make contacts. That's the reason we want you to come. It'd be a great place to come if you're new and you want to kind of learn about this profession. If you have an interest in it, we've got a lot of surprises. I don't want to give those out yet, but as we get closer, you'll start to see them. I would encourage you. I do think this is going to be a popular event. So if you have any interest, don't dawdle. I mean, get signed up, and we'll probably have those things up by the time you're listening to this. So please, if you can, come join us. I think you'll find it to be very interesting. You'll make some great contacts. You'll see. You'll probably learn a few things, and I think you'll have a hell of a good time.
President of the World Association of Detectives. There'll be more details on the screen. Follow the link here: www.wad.net. And just to finish off, Wes, thanks. It's been a great conversation. I want you to leave everyone that's listening with your leadership philosophy. Just what you've experienced, and just give us some points and tips to leaders out there that what's worked for you and maybe what's not worked too.
First thing I would tell you: lead from the back. Don't lead from the front. I mean, the people that I work with, and I work with them. I don't, they don't work for me necessarily. I work with them. And that's the first thing is that, your people that you're trying to, whether it's in your business or whatever, you've got to learn to treat with respect. You got to learn to listen to them, even when you hear things you don't want to hear sometimes. That's the first thing. The second thing I always think as a leader is understand what your goal is. Understand what your mission is. You can get in there and try to take on the world, and sometimes that ambition can be a little too much. And you also got to, you also have to keep your hand on the wheel. I mean, you need to make sure that you're always headed towards that mission and that goal, and trying to accomplish what you're trying to accomplish. So, those are some of the philosophies that I've had. Is just try to be relatable. Try to understand that most of business is not sitting in a $1 million boardroom off Fifth Avenue in New York making worldwide decisions. Most of it is done over a cup of coffee, on the telephone or on your kitchen table or something like that. So, try to be relatable. Try to be friendly and have a sense of humor. This is life's short, and you ought to have a good time.
Sound advice from the President of the World Association of Detectives, Wes Bearden. It's been a pleasure talking to you. If anyone wants to contact Wes, his details will come up on the screen now. And that's another episode of Leaders
Thanks, Mike.
Podcast. Thanks very much.